After 10 days of negotiations in Geneva, hopes for the world's first-ever treaty to end plastic pollution have collapsed, again. This was the second time in just 8 months that talks have failed, leaving the planet still without a legally binding plan to tackle one of the biggest environmental crises of our time. So what went wrong? The discussions, led by the United Nations Environment Programme, were meant to finalize a treaty that had been in the works since a historic resolution was adopted in 2022. But when it came down to the details, deep divisions between countries became impossible to bridge. One of the biggest sticking points was the scope of the treaty. Nearly 100 countries, led by Norway, the European Union, the UK, and others in what's called the High Ambition Coalition, wanted tough, legally binding measures. They pushed for cuts in plastic production, stronger regulation of toxic chemicals, and clear recognition of health risks linked to plastic. Their argument was simple: cutting production reduces waste, reduces fossil fuel use, and tackles the problem at its root. But on the other side were powerful oil and petrochemical producers, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, and Russia, with backing from China and India. These nations argued that the treaty was going beyond environmental protection and creeping into trade restrictions. They stressed that plastic is essential for economic development, and production cuts would threaten their industries and growth. India, in particular, opposed global phase-out lists that targeted single-use items like straws, cutlery, and microbead-based cosmetic. Even though India has banned many of these items domestically, it resisted having them written into an international treaty, citing the right to development and warning that broad rules would unfairly impact developing countries. The draft treaty itself became another source of frustration. The version circulated on August 13 left out key measures on production cuts, chemicals of concern, and even definitions. Many countries blasted it as weak, unbalanced, and nothing more than a waste management plan. Words like repulsive and disappointing were used by negotiators. When a revised draft was shared 2 days later, it did recognize that plastic production and consumption are at unsustainable levels. But petrochemical-producing nations rejected it outright, while others said it still lacked ambition. At the heart of the stalemate is money and fairness. Developing nations, including India, Cuba, and Malaysia, argued that if the treaty imposes strict obligations, then there must also be equally strong financial and technical support. Without funding and technology transfer, they said, ambitious targets would just place unfair burdens on poorer nations. The failure in Geneva shows how divided the world remains over plastic. One side sees production cuts as essential for tackling pollution, while the other insists plastics are tied to economic growth and development. Until these fundamental disagreements are resolved, the dream of a binding global plastics treaty will remain out of reach. If you like the video, then don't forget to subscribe. It really motivates us to create helpful videos.